Hey everyone, welcome to my very first YouTube video ever. My name is Emily, I'm 38 and I was diagnosed with invasive ductal carcinoma stage 2 breast cancer in October of 2021. It's now May, almost June of 2022, and I have completed 16 rounds of chemotherapy. This Thursday, I'll be undergoing a bilateral mastectomy followed by reconstruction and then radiation, daily radiation, 6 to 8 weeks after that as well. And I'm here just to share my story with you. Disclaimer, I'm not a healthcare professional at all. I do realize that we could have the same type of cancer, same type of treatment, but everyone's completely different, may have an entirely different set of reactions, side effects, a completely different experience overall. But I know that when I was first diagnosed, it really helped me to hear stories from other women who were going through the same thing that I was going through. Because I know that the unknown aspect of just cancer itself, it's scary, it's tough, and being a big planner myself, I do enjoy spontaneity, but I'd like at least an hour in advance notice if my life is going to be just completely turned upside down. So, it is hard. I understand how hard it is to have your just sense of self, your sense of security and confidence just really taken away from you overnight. It feels like, before I was told that I have cancer, I was generally very healthy. I exercised, I just had a good energy level, and then, suddenly that changed. So I guess I'll start with how I found the lump. It was just during a self-examination, and I felt a little firm lump, probably the size of the tip of my pinky. It was a little bit fluid. It moved around just a little bit when I pressed on it. It was deep in the tissue underneath my right nipple, deep in the tissue when I pressed down on it, and I was alarmed. It kind of did feel like it came out of nowhere. I did eventually go and get ultrasound as well as a mammogram. I do have cancer in my history. My mother had breast cancer about almost 3 years ago, but I really just thought I was too young. I thought that was something I was going to have to worry about maybe in my late 50s or early 60s. I know that cancer happens to anyone at any age. Babies get cancer, women in their 20s. It doesn't discriminate, but it just seems to be so much more rare in younger adults. And I didn't know anyone, any of my friends, anyone in the network of people that I worked with. I didn't know anyone my age that has breast cancer. So even with that history there, I didn't think it was something I would have to worry about until much later. I thought it was a cyst. Even the doctors who saw me thought that it was more than likely a cyst. I even received a letter in the mail after having had the ultrasound and the mammogram that stated that it was more than likely benign. Because at that point when I did finally go and have the ultrasound and the mammogram, it was starting to get a little bit smaller. I did have some pain around that area, but it started to kind of get flatter as opposed to maintaining its lump shape. So I thought that it was going away, and the doctor also said that more than likely it was benign. It would collapse on its own. If it started to get bigger at a later date, I could come in, have a biopsy. So this is where I'm going to stress that if you find a lump in your breast, I recommend going ahead, whether you have history of cancer in your family or not. Get that biopsy right away. Fight for that, despite you being young, because I did have a hard time finding someone who would even healthcare provider who even wanted to give me a mammogram. push for that. That way you can get that confirmation. You can rule it out entirely, that it is in fact either a cyst, or it's just a growth, or, is it cancer? Because there is a stage 0 cancer for being the most advanced stage of cancer. And if you catch it early enough, you might be in that group of people who don't have to go through extensive chemotherapy. The earlier the better always. Thankfully mine has not metastasized. It hasn't spread to any of my other body parts, but I really did not know, even with my mother having had cancer, I wasn't able to go to all of her appointments with her, just because I worked so much. And so she never really talked about her experience that much. I know that she had a hard time, but she didn't go through chemotherapy the way that I did. She ended up having a lumpectomy. But I even with her having went through that, I didn't know that cancer was going to this breast cancer was going to take up the better half of the year of my life. I thought, if you get breast cancer, you just get your breast removed and then you move on with your life. Basically, I didn't know that there was going to be so many tests, so much treatment, and things like that. So I digress, but fast forward a few months later, the lump ended up getting larger. It went from that pea size, it started to flatten, but then it started to reshape again. And by the time I came back to the doctor, it was almond sized at that point and very painful. My nipple even had a lot of redness. It was starting to turn purple. I hadn't been able to go in sooner, but when I did finally go, and I finally had a biopsy, which is it's a needle, and what they do is they take samples of the tissue. They even put a marker in your breast so that if they have to go back in, they'll know exactly where that location is of the lump, and in the other areas that they might think looks a little suspicious or a little weird. But that sounds kind of like a staple gun, and they warn you when they're getting ready to take a sample, and they did that to the lump in my breast, as well as area deep under my arm that they also took samples of. And so a week later, I came back to get the results of the biopsy, and I was nervous, but I honestly just thought it was just, they were going to tell me it was a cyst. I guess I was just so naive at that point, because I'd always been in such good health. Nothing more than a cold here and there, sore throat. I've never had surgery for anything, major surgery for anything. So when the doctor told me, she said, yeah, I'm very sorry to tell you this, but the tests came back and the results do show that the tumor is cancer, and it is breast cancer. And as she was telling me all this information, I was just kind of listening to her very matter-of-factly. It hadn't set in just yet that she just confirmed that I had cancer. It wasn't until I was in the waiting room waiting to be called back in after all the appointments with an oncologist and a radiologist were scheduled, that it really just hit me at that point. I started thinking about just my kids, and honestly I was kind of annoyed as well, because I was like, I ain't got time for this. Who has time to be going to all these doctor's appointments? And then you also get this flash of like movie cancer, where you see people who are just deathly ill, laying in bed, unable to do anything, and you just realize that your life is about to change drastically. And I just started crying in the waiting room among other patients and strangers. At the time, I thought because of COVID, you couldn't have anyone in the doctor's room with you, but I wasn't aware that wasn't actually the case. So my husband wasn't with me, but I was just crying softly or quietly to myself, and kind of got myself under control, got all the information I needed, test. I had a PET scan, MRI, numerous blood work, things like that. and I got my Metaport put in not long after, which that wasn't bad. They put you out for it. It's just probably like 45 minutes to an hour and a half. I mean, an hour and a half or so. And the next, you go home the very same day. It was very tight at first. I found myself like constantly just trying to rub it to soothe the skin around it when I was able to touch it and when the bandage and everything came off. But now I don't even feel that it's there. But the reason that you get a chemo port is because getting chemo in your veins in your arm can be very damaging, and so this is attached to a deeper vein that runs along here that's just able to take the chemotherapy without getting damaged as much as the veins in your arm. And that's where I would typically get the injection, and that's where I would get my blood work drawn, and where I would get my chemo infusions and injections was through here. And this is of course going to be removed during my mastectomy also, so I'm very excited about it. So I was pretty positive up until I got my first round of AC, which is also known as doxorubicin, adriamycin, and Cytoxan, aka Red Devil, which when it's Red Devil, it's probably not going to be pleasant, but it's also called Red Devil because of its red color. And when the nurses told me what it was called, I was like, oh great, this sounds like this is gonna be fun, like, here's your chemo, this is the Red Devil, it is going to kill your cancer and also your spirit. That was like the worst Arnie impersonation ever, but what can you do? So yeah, my first round of AC, I was really tired that day. I couldn't even talk afterwards. It took about maybe 4 hours in total, but afterwards I was just extremely tired. I couldn't even speak like at a normal rate. Everything was I just completely slowed down. I don't know if you've ever seen Edward Scissorhands, but at the very beginning when Winona Ryder is an old woman and she starts talking about her youth, that's how I sounded to myself. I was just so extremely tired. And for me, traditionally with AC, the third day, I would get my AC on Tuesdays. By Thursday was my worst day for side effects, and that's because at that point the steroids, the pre-medications that they give you have pretty much gone out of your system. And it kind of feels like if you've ever had a really, really bad hangover, it just feels like a full body hangover. Your head is foggy. Sometimes it kind of hurts a bit, like your stomach, your digestive system just completely comes to a halt. You feel just ill and nauseated the entire time that you're conscious. They do give you 2 different types of nausea medication, which help, but it just never leaves you. It's an all day just a horrible fatigue. If during that time frame after I had just had AC, if you had given me like a bills or something to try, like an activity to try to complete mentally, I did not have the capacity to do that. I couldn't even read or respond to text messages. I know it sounds really bad, but I always kept in mind, even at the worst moments when I felt really, really horrible, I just reminded myself that if I feel this bad, then it means that it's working. It's terminating or shrinking those cancer cells, and my tumor did shrink completely to where it wasn't even detectable by a regular examination by the very end of it. But it was tough because my first round of chemo, I thought I was going to be like the Disney princess of chemo. I was going to go in and just, be positive and be like this image of strength and endurance. And when I got that first chemo, and it was such a huge contrast to how I normally felt, which was energetic, I was able to get up and do things. And then now I felt like a just completely diluted version of myself. I felt like I was a visitor in my own body, like I had no control of my body any longer. I was just so tired. All I could do was sleep. I felt sick. I was afraid to eat, but at the same time I was super hungry. When I did eat, nothing tasted good. Water was bitter, or afterwards I would have like this very sweet lingering taste in my mouth. I couldn't eat with plastic utensils. It had to be glass. It seemed like anything in plastic, like in a plastic cup or something like that, it just had this weird taste to me for some reason. I had really, really dry mouth every night. It was horrible, like the driest mouth I've ever experienced. I had achy joints, which after AC, the very next day I would have to come in and get a injection to help boost my white blood cells, and that happened every time I had AC, which for that chemo, I had it once every 2 weeks, once every other week, because you would have it, and then you would get allotted a week for your body to rest and recuperate before you get your next treatment or your next infusion. And my first round of it actually depressed me a lot the very first week, because I thought that was how I was going to feel every single day up until I was done with chemo, that nauseated, that fatigued. And it was depressing to me because, at that point, like I missed my old problems. I missed having the energy to be able to get up and do the dishes and do laundry. And it was hard because I felt like at that time my life was just completely on pause. I had plans. I had just started a new job not that long prior. I was hoping to maybe try to advance in my career. I wanted to buy a house. I wanted to take my kids to see the snow in Tennessee in winter, and but I couldn't. All those plans had to be paused, and you watched all of your friends continue to do just the normal things, celebrate weddings, birthdays, just the regular things that you want to do. And it was hard. Like I even towards my second round of chemo, I was even getting jealous of my husband, like just him walking around. I'd just be like, look at him and his good cells, and if you're going through chemo, I highly recommend going up to healthy people and like not blinking and telling them like, I like your cells. Yeah, that's a great way to make friends. But thankfully, all that being said, the week, your recovery week, you do actually feel much better. You're not as fatigued. You feel pretty normal. And I tried to like live my best life during that second week when I was actually recovering from AC, because at that point my digestion was kind of back. I could eat. I did not actually lose weight during chemo, which I thought I would. I actually gained a bit of weight towards the end of my treatment. I had 16 rounds altogether, 4 rounds of AC and then 12 rounds of Taxol. But because they give you a lot of steroids to help your appetite and also help prevent allergic reactions, I pretty much kept my appetite for the most part. I didn't start throwing up until my last round of AC. That's when I threw up a couple of times, but for the most part, like I tried to eat consistently as much as possible, because the nurses told me that would help get some of that chemo keep my digestion going and help get it out of my system faster, metabolize it faster, if you will. And AC does accumulate, so I noticed that each round that I had, it was taking a few more days to recover each time. And that was hard. I by like the third time it was for by the third time I was set to have AC, like I was getting anxiety about going and getting my treatment, just because I knew I was about to just basically shut down for a few days. I knew how sick it was going to make me feel. I knew I wouldn't be able to even leave the house or just do the things that I wanted to do. Like my first AC, I know, like on a Friday, I had went to do just a Walmart pickup, and it exhausted me. Like I was in the car, I didn't even get out, and I got home, and I a lot of times I just had to get back in bed. I slept a lot. Even when I was awake, I would just kind of sit there and stare off into the distance. I know that sounds horrible, but I promise you the worst of it does pass, and your body is going to be resilient. And you know, it's hard, but it does pass, and you are going to have moments and days where you feel so much better. And I read somewhere where other cancer survivors were saying you can live your best life, and I was like, no, you can't. I was like, how? This shit sucks. But you actually can. I recommend not letting your worst days and your fears and your diagnosis take the things that you love most away from you. Get out there and walk, keep moving, exercise when you can, spend time with your friends and your family and the people who matter to you. Don't isolate yourself, because I know I felt that way during my first few rounds. I felt alone. I felt lonely. I didn't know anyone else my age going through this. And even when I went to get my treatments at the cancer facility, I was always the youngest person there. And not that that matters, but it does you already feel isolated. You already feel, you know, like no one knows what you're going through, and it's really hard, especially after you start losing your hair, which I lost my hair about 2 weeks after my first round of AC. I'm going to do a separate video about the hair loss, because to me it was such a big part of it. You know, I saw other women, of course, who were bald either by choice or because of alopecia or cancer treatment or another medical for other medical reasons, and I see them and think that they looked beautiful. But when I saw myself bald, I didn't see that at all. I thought that I saw a much older person, just someone who was not me. And my hair has started to grow back. It was starting to grow actually during Taxol, but I did end up losing all of my eyebrows. Well, most of my eyebrows. I probably have like four hairs there, and like pretty much all of my lashes, but my hair has started to slowly grow back. It's growing back all white, and if you knew me before, I had this thick dark hair, and I never thought I had like beautiful hair until I lost all my hair. And now it's growing back, and I had a lot of white hairs too, but now it seems like it's growing back all white, which I'm told is completely normal, and can sometimes even grow back really curly, or in very rare instances grow back a different color. But it is starting to grow. It's a bit concerning for me, because it's only growing at first like on the side, so I kind of look like Mr. Burns from The Simpsons. It's not really wanting to grow at the top. My hair, like some of my hair is like, hello love, we are trying, you know, we're getting ready for the pot. I don't know what accent that is. And then the other ones are just like, no, we're good. We don't want to show up for work. But it's growing, so that's something. If it does just remain white, at least I can get a senior citizen discount, I suppose, when I go out to eat. So that's something. So in your face, cancer. But yeah, so AC was difficult. It does, the side effects do accumulate, because as you get each dose, it builds in your system, and it takes a little bit longer each time, at least it did for me, to bounce back. But I got through it. I got past it, and it felt like such a huge relief. I got to ring the bell during my last AC treatment, which was the 28th of December. And it was weird because, or actually, let me come back to that. then I started Taxol, and Taxol, my doctors were telling me that it was going to be a walk in the park compared to AC, and I didn't want to believe them at first because I had been so ill. I was just kind of like, prepared for the worst. Like they're not telling me the truth about it, but it actually was so much better. I like the first dose, I got a little bit of a tummy ache, but it was almost like nothing happened. Like I felt pretty much fine. I was still tired, but I did not get the extreme nausea and fatigue. It wasn't until later, probably around my eighth or ninth one, where I did start to feel a bit more tired. I was having and still have leg fatigue. The muscles in my legs are a bit sometimes my legs feel a bit heavy. I did experience neuropathy mostly in my hands. I am now, up to this point, it's been about 3 weeks going on a month since I've had my last round of Taxol. I'm starting to get the feeling back in my fingers. It's just the pads of my fingers now that are numb. So, I feel like I'm kind of thawing out, like my body is coming back to life slowly, but I do still have like leg tiredness. I do try to exercise and go walking and running when I can, but I haven't been able to as much as I would like to, just because I'd wake up and my legs just felt really, really tired and heavy, which I'm told was normal. With Taxol, it does lower your white blood cell count, so I'm about 3 weeks delayed. I would have been done with all of my chemo sooner, but I got COVID once back in, I think it was January. Thankfully I didn't have severe symptoms. I was fine. I didn't even know I had COVID. I thought I just had a bit of a cold. We caught it from my mother-in-law, and thankfully she's fine, and we ended up fine. But then also there were a couple of weeks where my white blood cell count was just too low for me to have it, and so when that would happen, I'd have to come in every single day and get an injection to help boost my white blood cell count. But I got past it, and Taxol. Oh, another thing about Taxol as a side effect is, because it causes you to have premenopausal symptoms, I was noticing that I would get really, really sweaty, like face and head at night primarily, but in the evening, not so much during the day, but it would just I would just sweat profusely, mostly at the top of my head. So I'd have to sleep with like a towel on my pillow, which I know that sounds, great, but and I also slept with a little fan pointing at me just to help alleviate, and sometimes it'd keep me up at night, but that's pretty normal. It's actually starting to reduce a bit, so that's great. That's good news. You go from having really super dry skin with AC to, I think my skin at this point now is like starting to be a bit more normal. So yeah, super dry skin during AC, which wasn't horrible, but I did end up having to change my face lotion to a cream instead of a lotion at night. I also had to change all of my lotions and my soap that I used from scented to unscented, because even certain smells would just make me even more nauseated. Like I couldn't stand the smell of the perfumes that I used to like. And so if you're thinking about getting a gift for someone who is undergoing chemo, you may want to, if you're buying lotions or anything like that, you may want to go unscented, just because I know at that point you get very sensitive, or they get very sensitive, or at least I did. Let me think of what else. So I am going to be having a double mastectomy on Thursday. I have to be at the hospital by 7. I'll be getting blood work. I think I'm getting an echocardiogram. I'm not entirely sure for what, but I'll more than likely talk about it and let you guys know how that went and what that experience is like. But I will be having both breasts removed. I do also have to get lymph node mapping that morning, which they're going to they're going to give me a chemical or something that under a certain scan will light up and show if any of my lymph nodes have to be removed under my arms, if they seem a bit suspicious, like they could be cancerous or they could cause complications down the road, which sucks because your lymph nodes do help you fight off certain illnesses. So not having them is, that can make you more prone to infections and things like that, but it's best to go ahead and have those removed. But when they do a double mastectomy, or even a mastectomy itself, they go deep into the tissue. It's not just the breast tissue, but they'll be taking the nipples as well as some of the skin around it. Immediately after my mastectomy, my reconstructive surgeon is going to go in and place breast expanders in my chest, which these will be stretching my skin. I'll have to come in and have a saline solution injected into my breasts, into these chest expanders, to help stretch my skin, and that will be done maybe 3 or 4 times. It really just depends. I'll get them injected, wait a couple of weeks so they set, and then finally, when my skin has stretched enough to where an implant can be placed in, then I'll go back in and have surgery for that, to have my implants. And I'll talk more about that experience when it comes up the road, when it's there. But so that's where I am. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. Hopefully when I do my other videos, I'll make them a lot shorter, but just to catch you up on everything that's been happening. If you're watching this and you've just found out that you have cancer, I want you to know that you are not alone. I know that it's scary. I know that it's really lonely. But I do think that this is a good opportunity to create a more powerful version of yourself, to level up mentally, physically, spiritually. Who's to say that you cannot have even better life after your diagnosis and after your treatment and during? You deserve so much. You deserve to be healthy and happy and fulfilled and thriving, and a lot of that is going to start with up here and just how you face this. And I'm not gonna lie, I've had moments where I cry in the shower or cry late at night into my pillow. I try not to let my kids see me and see how it has impacted me at times. You can't help, even though you're grateful and you're thankful and you have so much to live for and there's so much to be excited and happy for, and you feel completely blessed. Even with that, there's going to be moments where you throw yourself a pity party, but just don't play the music too loud at that pity party, if you know what I mean. Get up and look for the things that are going to help you get through this as best as possible. And if you need to cry, that doesn't mean you're not strong. It doesn't mean that you're not grateful, but fight for yourself, not just for the old version, but for the version of you that's going to live a long and generous life. And for other people, for other women and survivors and fighters, you didn't ask for this, but you can take this and help other people to get through it. And I think that's at least something big to take away from it. But anyways, I hope everyone enjoys the rest of the day, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks for watching.